Welcome back to part 4 of the 5-part series where I'm rebuilding the chainsaw. In this one I'm reassembling the frame and body. And if you've ended up with a box full of nuts and bolts and you're not sure which ones go where on the machine, then I've added some tips in this video to help you find the correct ones for the correct places. Welcome to the Repair Specialist channel, because knowledge is power. So let's get to it. Okay, so we've got the engine and crankcase together now and we can start building this up now all around. Right, before I go any further, what I'm going to do, just so I remember to do so, I'm going to place this little springy type thing here back onto the clutch side of the crankshaft. What this does, when it's in the right place, it operates the oil pump for the bar. And there's a tiny little recess right there. So this goes kind of press fits down until the bottom part of the spring fits in that recess. And probably one of the best things to do here is to use a socket that fits over the shaft but will push down the spring. We can then give the end a little tap. Okay, we've maxed the length of that little socket out, so okay, it's going down nicely. There we go. It's clicked into that little recess. And it wouldn't have mattered which way round this was put. The coils will always end up facing the right way. Okay, so what goes on next is this mechanism here. This is the pump. And the way it works is when these threads, let's call it the worm, when the crankshaft turns, that worm then turns this here. Let's call this the wheel. And when this turns, it rotates a mechanism inside here that draws oil from the reservoir to the bar. Okay, so we'll place that in, and the tip of this goes into that little area there. So we'll put that into this area like that, and give it a little wiggle, and then it goes in. Right, so the next task is to find the right screws for this out of all of these. So it's easily enough to do. Obviously we take a look in there, we can see whatever goes in there is very thin. We can just see that it bottoms out at about that length and it's going into plastic. Those three important things. Because what's usually the case, that anything that goes into plastic wouldn't have screws like this. These are fine that usually screw into metal. The screws will be more like this, more coarse. This screw is obviously too big, it won't fit in there. Now we've got these little tiny ones. They do look about the right thickness for that hole and about the right length. And the threads are nice and coarse, more like a screw. I dare bet these are the screws. And these are a T20 torque head. And looking at the top here, it looks like there's been a washer on there. It'll be a special washer. Let's take a look at our washers. Won't be that one. That's way too big. It is this one. And judging by these two surfaces, probably goes on that way. Yep. And next is the clutch housing and sprocket, and the bearing is inside there, and I'm pretty sure that won't need replacing. That's fine. Then before we put the actual clutch in there, there's a larger washer, and we can see there which way round this is used to going. We can see that this obviously contacts the clutch, this side. Okay, so next we'll fit the centrifugal clutch. Obviously it screws on. It threads on counterclockwise. That's it. Until we see the crankshaft turning as well, and it is. Now we need to lock the crankshaft, and a simple way of doing it is to get a piece of recoil rope in the spark plug hole and turn and let the piston butt up to it, and it'll lock the piston safely. It's not going to create any damage to the new components. We'll just turn it very steadily until the engine locks. There, the piston has come up to the recoil rope and it's stopped the engine. Now there is a special tool for tightening these, but I don't have one here. And let's be honest, very few of us, if we're doing these ourselves, are going to have every specific specialised tool for every different model of chainsaw, for different things all around the saw. So what I normally do in a situation like this, if I don't have the correct tool, is I just make sure that this is pinched up, because what's going to happen anyway is that when the engine turns, the crankshaft will rotate that way. These wings here will then spread out into this drum, thus gripping it and turning it. And with the crankshaft in there rotating that way, and there being load now on the centrifugal clutch, these threads and this whole clutch system will naturally tighten onto the crankshaft as the machine is operating. But we do have to initially make sure it's pinched tight, just so it doesn't come off to begin with. So what I do, using something soft like this soft mallet, I'll put the mallet on this side here, and then I'll get another little mallet like this and give it a tap. Now that wasn't too hard, and the end of this mallet here was soft enough not to damage it. But that will have pinched it into the threads enough not to come loose when we initially start the engine, and then when we start the engine and run the machine, it will naturally tighten in. Okay, so I'm going to keep that there just for a little while because I will be placing on the flywheel shortly. In fact, we'll do that now. So we've got the little slot out there for the key. As I said earlier, the keys on these are not separate from the flywheel. They're part of the casted mould. Okay, so we get that on there. Okay, that's slotted in nicely. Now we're at that scenario again where we need to find the right nut for this and a potential washer. So we've got to look at the thickness and the threads, take that into consideration. And if we look on top of the flywheel here, we can see that there is evidence of something there, like a mark there, as if it has had some kind of washer, and it's that wide. So let's take a look here. We're looking for one washer, of course, and we're looking for one type of nut. So let's have a look. Here we've got a nut. There's another one here the same. Because they're the same type, they're twins, it's not likely to be those. So if we have a look here, well, actually there's a washer there. So I'll put that to one side a minute. And there's a nut here. That seems to be a loner. There isn't another one like it. And the fact that this nut is around about the same thickness as the shaft and the threads look around about the same. Let's take a look. So we've got this washer, it's actually concaved. This side of the washer has got a little mark, a ring mark. That side of the washer hasn't. If we look at the flywheel there, we can see there's a slight mark on the outer edge here, about the same thickness as this. That must mean that this concaved piece here has gone that way on. And judging by the looks of this little mark here on the washer, it looks about the same circumference as this nut. So it looks to me like we've got a good match, and indeed that's screwing on well there, so it is the right one. So this is the kind of principle we use to put these kind of things together if we get them as a box of parts. We can just use a little common sense of what looks like it goes where with the right size, and we can usually get there no problem. Okay, so now we'll tighten it. The engine's still locked up with the recoil rope, and it looks to me like a 13mm socket is required. Okay, so we'll take out the recoil rope, we'll turn the engine. Absolutely fine. Right, okay, so now we may as well fit the coil pack, and we're going to be trying to find the correct bolts for these. So let's take a look. We've got a very narrow hole, so we know we're looking for a narrow kind of bolt, and it's quite a fine thread in there. It's also got to be long enough to go through this thickness here of metal in order to get through to the threads. And another important observation is that it's going to be screwing into metal, not plastic. Okay, so it's not going to be this kind of screw bolt type thing, because this is a coarse thread that's normally used to go into plastic. We've got this. That's a fine thread, looks like it goes into metal, it's quite thin as well, and it looks quite long enough. And if there's two of these, it would suggest that they were made for the job. And there's another one. Let's see if the threads actually go in and they're okay. They seem an absolute great fit, so I would say these are the ones. The position of this then, you can't really get it the wrong way round. We know we've got to get these metal parts as close to the flywheel as possible, so that's a logical position. Now if we tried to get it in another position, well, that's definitely not going to work there, you can see. If we tried to turn it the other way round, that way, no, definitely it's just plastic there. It's definitely hard to get this the wrong way around. So let's just offer this up and put it on loosely, and then we'll set the distance between the coil and the flywheel, the air gap. I'm not going to tighten it right up, as I've said, because I want it to move in order to set the air gap very shortly. Okay, so that's in place and it's just moving up and down exactly the way I want it. And I've got a piece of card here that I will place in between, one that represents a business card that everyone uses nowadays. Okay, so there's the air gap, and one might say, well, that's not an actual business card, it's a piece of card, it might not be the correct gap. But we've got to remember that the business cards we always use aren't the correct tool either. The correct tool is a feeler gauge. And still, yet we've become accustomed to a business card being the right thing to use. As long as we're using common sense, we can still get these machines built up well and running well. Okay, so I've turned the flywheel so that the magnets have pulled down the coil onto it and it's been gapped by the piece of cardboard. And so now I'm going to get my T20 torque. Okay, so that's that on. And the gap's absolutely grand there, nothing catching. What I've got is my tiny little pick, and I'm going to get this part here, the part that's facing inside. I'm going to get that, just hold it with my pick, okay? And then I'm going to pull the starter dog across, and I'm going to pull that part underneath the starter dog, and then pull it up and let it go. And then hopefully I can wiggle it out. Ah, there we go. Yes, no problem. It's the same with this one then. So I'm going to take my little pick and I'm going to take the hook part of the spring and I'm going to move the starter dog across there and I'm going to come underneath it. It's come out from underneath it there. See, it's come underneath it and I'm going to let it go onto it. Absolutely brilliant. It's took the tension on both of them. Right, I don't need to go inside the cylinder for anything else. So I'm going to loosely put on this spark plug now to stop anything going in there. Okay, so let's look at building up the inlet manifold in the carburetor area. So let's have a look at our parts. All we're looking for then, really, is looking for something with that shape. So if we look down here, one obvious thing is something this size, it's got that same shape. Okay, so we have that part. Now let's look for its gasket. And we've got our box of newbies, and it doesn't take seconds before we've found the gasket. Just match that up. That's the one. Any damage to this structure, this is the inlet manifold, then the chainsaw will be drawing in air in an unnatural place and that will make it run lean. And we can think it's things like the carburetor at fault or the main seals, when really it can be this problem. But this is absolutely fine. And it's the same when we come to use the gasket. If the gasket is damaged, it won't seal. So it will draw in air in an unnatural place and that will cause the same sort of issues. We'll make sure the surface it's going on as well is nice and clean, got no debris on it. That'll allow us to draw in air where it shouldn't. That's absolutely fine. Right, so the next task, we need to find the correct bolts for these. Taking a look here, we'll do our usual examination. We need 4 of the same, we can see that. It's also going into metal, so the threads will be slightly finer. And we can see the sort of thickness we need. And if we look here at the side, we can see the sort of length we're going to need because it's got to go through this thickness to screw into there. So let's take a look. Right, we are looking for 4. These guys are out because the threads are too coarse. They're the ones that go into plastic. Now this one here does look like a respectable length and diameter, and it's a fine thread. So let's take a look. Okay, so we've got the right thread at least. Now, are there 4 of these guys? There are certainly 4. And they do look the right sort of length. Okay, now we can look at fitting it. So let's move this out of the way just to give us some more room there. We can see clearly. Right, so I put the gasket up to the face like this, hold it there, got 2 bolts through. It's holding the gasket in the right place now, so that when I offer it all up to the machine, it shouldn't have dropped down. So now I'll do just that. Okay, you can see there that the gasket's in place and we've got the screws heading into the little screw holes there. So then I'll turn one of the screws just to get it started there, so it's held in place on this one. I'll do the same with the one on the opposite side, screwing it in. So that's being held in place now loosely. It's exactly what I want, because now I'm going to just put the other 2 in loosely. Yeah, it's a little fiddly, but it can be done now. The gasket's in place, we know it's not going to drop anywhere. These 2 are holding it, and screw that in place, and the last one. Okay, so we've got it there in place. Yep, that's in the right place. I've got each screw started in its threads. All I need to do now is tighten them up. Obviously, I'm going to tighten them up in opposites to bring it up evenly. Okay, so I've just got my wrench with my torque head on it. Right, now that the manifold is brought up nice and evenly, we can now tighten these screws. Just go over them again. Okay, nice and tensioned. And we'll have a look back there. We can see the gasket on the back and everything's fine. Right then, what is next? The carburetor, of course, after we've put on the gasket. Now it's ready to fit to the machine. So let's bring in the machine and we've got the new gasket. We can see that that only goes one way. See by the hole there. We'll just match that up and pop that on now. Right, so that's on. Now we'll slide on the carb. Again, it can only go one way, just like the gasket, of course. But before we place the carb on, it's best that we put this throttle linkage on first, because when the carb's fitted in situ like that, this shroud here actually covers the throttle lever and it's difficult to hook it in. So at this stage now, here's the throttle lever. There's a tiny hole there. This just hooks in like this in that position. So the linkage comes down and goes this way over the carb. Now we can slide it on. There we go. Linkage is there. So you can see now about what I was saying about this. You can see this wall here, this face. It would be difficult to get that on. Okay, so at this point, before the carb's secured in, we need to fit the choke lever. This here is the choke plate. Move this lever at the side, the choke closes. So the best way to fit this, which we have to hook on, is to pull the choke lever back. This then exposes the hole there. Then all we do is we take this and hook it in the hole. That's it. This lever then slots in that gap there below the stop switch. So that goes there, like that. Okay, so what goes on next is the air filter cover. Before I do fit it, I'll give it a little spray and a wipe. Right, again, this can only fit on one way. There's no gasket that goes between this plastic and the carburetor. There's only a gasket that goes between the carburetor and the manifold. And the main reason there's a gasket only between the carb and the manifold is because at this stage, when the carburetor has mixed the air and fuel to just the right constitution, then of course it's vital we don't draw in any air here, because it'll mess with the constitution it's just made for the engine. Here, there's no constitution made yet. Obviously the manufacturers decided that the plastic will seal enough here to stop any debris going in to the carb. Okay, so let's slide that on. There we go. Special screw. Okay, it's all together now and we'll put on the nuts. So which are the correct nuts? Well, we can see they're going to be very small. And if we take a look at the plastic just around this set pin area, it's very flat and there's an edge to it. So we're looking for a nut that will fit on that edge. So we're looking for small nuts, 2 of them, that will complement that edge around the set pin. These here, they're small and they have that shoulder around them. So these will be the ones. If you're finding it too fiddly, then of course you can always get a socket and place the nut in the end of the socket. I've got a socket and extension here. Then we'll continue to tighten the nuts at the bottom to bring it up nice and even. A little bit more on the set pin. Obviously these are only small, so they don't need to be too tight, but they do need to be tight enough so that we seal that gasket between the carburetor and the manifold. It's fine. Right, so now let's sort out all this pipe work. Okay, I'll start with this one just because it's there flopping around. And if we take a look at the back of the primer bulb there, there's a short pipe coming off the primer bulb. And if we take this off here, you can see that there's a longer one. So the longest flexible pipe here fits on the back of the primer bulb on the longest rigid pipe there. But of course it needs to be placed into this area here. So I'll explain how it does that. There's 2 wings on the back here. These wings, of course, are retainers for the primer bulb that holds it into place. It'll click into place. And if we look in there, it goes into place like that. So one wing is on this side and the other wing is on this side. That's how it fits in. And which way does it go in? With the longest pipe at the top or the shortest pipe at the top? Well, let's have a look at the top. We'll soon find that out. We already know that this long pipe goes onto the longest rigid pipe, and that seems to be at the top. The other pipe is lower down. So that's the way I will put that in. So I'm going to put it in that way. And I'm going to push it in until those wings appear out the back and click into place. So let's have a look. There. That's in. Now I'm going to use these long nose pliers to place the pipes on the back of the primer bulb. So we'll take the small one first and we'll place it onto the bottom pipe. There we go. And then the top pipe should be even easier than that. Place that onto the top. There we go. Okay, so they're fitted into place. Now there's just the bottom pipe to sort out. That would have been easier if I'd done that before I put on the shroud, but it's no problem. Again, we've got the long nose pliers. It fits right down here onto this small rigid brass pipe that comes out of the carb. So we'll take the end of the pipe and simply place it on. Okay, there we go. Right, now we'll take our new air filter and place it in. If we look at the shape of this, it can only go one way. Place that in first like this. Now the air filter's retainer, it's just this cage looking item. But first I'll just give it a quick wipe, get that debris off. Okay, that's looking a lot cleaner. Now the way we put these on, of course it can only go one way just like the filter, but there's a little tab at the bottom. This tab first slots in to a little slot at the bottom of the housing, like so, and then we put the retaining bolt in. But out of all of those parts left, what is the correct bolt for that? Well, let's have a look at what it is again. It's plastic, so we're looking for a coarse screw type thread, and it's going to be quite small. Looking at this, relatively short. We've got some here that look like the right thickness, and the threads look like the right type of threads. They're like a screw thread, but that one is too long. It wouldn't protrude out that much. We've got this one, which is the same sort of thread, and it's shorter. I would say that does work. So let's try that. And indeed it screws in there fantastically. Okay, let's tighten that up. It's going into plastic, so not too tight. That's good. Right, so next, let's just tidy up these wires. Let's join them. This particular wire here with the loop, I should have put on this bolt here when I put on the coil pack. But that's no problem because I can still undo this bolt here and put this on. Because the bottom one's tight, it shouldn't move. So let's just do that now. There we go, place that in there. Now place them both back. Okay, now we will just check the gap again to make sure with our piece of card again. Yes, there's no issues with the gap there. Okay, so the spade connector on this wire here fits on this tab, which is part of the stop switch. So we'll just slide that on. There we go, clicked into place. Okay, so we've got the carburetor and the air filter housing on. We've connected the wires, the fuel pipes. Let's now turn it round, take a look at the parts of the exhaust and find out the correct bolts. Okay, so we've got the exhaust. We need this part and this part and this part. Right, so let's take a look. It's screwing into metal, so the threads are going to be a little finer than those that screw into the plastic. And also we've got an idea of the thickness of the bolt. And when we look from the side, we've got an idea of the length. There's two of them, and they're looking suspiciously like the ones we need. Let's just try one of them in the threads. Yes, they are indeed the ones. Right, so the first thing we'll need to look at is the heat deflector. What I'll want to do is just clean this up. So I'll give it a bit of a spray and then a wipe. What does really matter is the cleanliness of the sealing faces. Right, so that's okay. And it's the same with the exhaust. The sealing faces have to be clean. So let's give it a quick check like this to make sure the actual metal itself wasn't distorted in the first place. That does look alright, looks quite flat, and it's got that machine feel to it. Right, so looking at the heat deflector, we can see we've got different markings on each side. So there's only one way really this can go on. Because if we were to match up the size of the opening on the manifold here, then we'd see, wouldn't we, straight away that this is the side this is being on. And for this particular model of chainsaw, there doesn't seem to be a gasket required between the heat shield and the exhaust manifold on the cylinder. But there is one for this side that goes between the heat shield and the exhaust. When you look at what we've got here, we've got quite a few things to hold, to put onto there, then screw in. So it looks quite awkward to do, and indeed it really is. Let me show you how I do this to make it a little easier. These sleeves here actually go in before the bolts, so we'll put them in now, then we'll let the bolts go in. And so now we know we've got to have a gasket between the exhaust and the heat deflector. Okay, we'll place that on, making sure we don't push the bolts back again. Then the heat deflector, we can see again which way round this goes. We can see by the mark on there, that's the correct size for this gasket. That's the way it's been, so we'll put that on next. The bolt's still coming through, that's it. We'll place the end of the wrench into the bolt so we can turn the bolt like that. Then we'll offer it up to the exhaust manifold on the cylinder and then screw that one in. Only a few threads, we don't need it screwed right up. But now it's holding all of this together. Then we'll do exactly the same with the other one. We'll align it. That's why we don't need to screw this in too far. We need this to move so we can align the next screw and then we'll screw that in. A few threads. So now that's all held in together. The exhaust, the gasket and the heat deflector. Okay, we'll tighten these up nice and even. We'll do a few turns of each. Slightly tight, not too much yet. Everything still looks okay. Nothing looks trapped or untoward. So now we can go ahead and carry on tightening. There we go. That's done, but there's a little more building up for the exhaust. And what goes on next is this spark arrestor. This is quite clean, so I'm going to fit this. But if there's debris around here and you can't quite see through it, then that can cause the engine to bog down because the gases can't get out. But this is fine. I'm going to fit that. It only fits one way. You can see the contour there. So let's place that on. Then we've got the cover. We can see which way round the cover goes. That way. Fit that. Now we're looking for the correct retaining nut for the cover. Is there a lone nut? There is a lone nut just here. It looks like a brass type nut, and that's because you could imagine this area here is prone to corrosion. So this type of nut is less likely to corrode and stick on here. So there's more chance we could get this off when we need to. So that's the correct one. Let's fit that. Like everything else, nice and tight, not too tight. Okay, now I think it's time to put on the handle. So we'll bring in the unit, and I'm keeping everything loose so that I can manipulate it that little bit better. And the first thing I want to do while they're both loose is I want to connect this throttle linkage here into here. But before we do connect it to the handle, we must fit this piece here. The throttle linkage is pushed through this hole. There, like so. We'll just manipulate this round. Okay, so now the throttle linkage is through the middle there. We take this part here, this little wingy sleeve part, and put it in the slot. There's a slot just there. There. Then, round here, we'll push this side that way, aligning these two holes. That's now aligned. And we have this little tiny bolt left. It looks like the right sort of size, and it's got the right type of thread to go into plastic. This will be the one. Okay, so when we pull the trigger, a little piece pops out the front there. So pulling the trigger then and exposing that little piece, we can see there's a little tiny slot there in that piece of plastic. It's this part here of the linkage that needs to be slotted inside of there. So it'll be in that position. Yes, it's fiddly. So we'll just have to try and move things round. That's it. I've got one part of it in there already. And then if we move it back a little, there. It's slotted nicely. It's exactly where I want it. Now, hopefully keeping this where it is in place, we'll continue to push all of this together. And what we're looking to do now is to connect the main unit to the handle. And we do that via the anti-vibration springs. We can see there's a hole there on the handle, so we need to bolt that to the spring. And it's the same on this side. We take a look underneath. We need to bolt the eye on that spring up here to this part. But to start off with, and in order to give it some stability, in order to move it round better, we'll start by fitting the spring across here. So the spring screws into this part of the cylinder, then onto the handle through this hole. It joins there. Because we've had a new cylinder, we've obviously got to fit a new spring. And here it is. It's come with the bolt already inside of it. And if we look down there, I can see through those coils that it's an alum-headed bolt. So through this little hole at the top here, I'm going to put a 4mm Allen key through, and now I can control the movement of that bolt. I can turn it. Okay, so we'll just line up the bolt with the hole. Again, a nice respectable tightness. There it is. Right, so now we've got to find the right bolt for this. This is plastic, and it looks to me like it makes its own thread as it goes through. So it's not going to be a fine thread like what we just screwed into this metal. They look the right sort of thickness. We will try the longer one to make sure that we've got enough threads. So let's have a go at that. We'll put that through the bolt hole there and offer it round to the hole on the spring there. Then we'll take the wrench and we'll start screwing it in. It is screwing in nicely. It's making its own threads as it goes through, and it's screwing it together. I'm not going to screw this completely tight because I still want some movement there, but that's put a rigidity, something more stable to the main unit. So I can now concentrate on moving it round and fixing the other springs to the handle. It's just a little easier to manoeuvre. So that bolt was good. So let's go down here and use another one of the same. We can use those. And we'll fix this AV spring in next. So we'll turn it upside down, find the bolt hole, which is there, and then we'll place it in. Line the bolt hole up with the bolt, then we'll get the wrench, screw it in. Yeah, that's going up nicely. As I say, I'll keep this loose again a little bit because I do want a bit of flexibility, but it's got that much more rigidity to it now, more stability, let's say, to manoeuvre it. So we'll turn it round and look for the other one. The other one is under here, and we've got to manoeuvre this a little to get the eye on the end to appear here. Okay, so there we go. There's the eye turned up. So we've got the choice again between a longer and a shorter one. I would say we'd need to use the shorter one here. So we'll try that. And we'll get the wrench. Yeah, that's going in nicely. And as all three are now connected, I'm going to start to tighten this one, sensibly tight. Okay, now we'll do the one on the top. There we go. Turn it round. We'll do the final one here. That's it. That's in place. We'll just make sure the other end of the spring is tight as well. Yeah, that's fine. Right, so we're getting to a stage now where this is starting to resemble a chainsaw. So what I want to do next is the recoil and fit that. So here we are. Let's take a look at this. I think I looked at this earlier and I could see there was no cracks or damage on the actual shroud of this. The spring itself is recoiling. It's bringing the rope back in. There's a handle present, but the rope itself is a little shabby. And I do have rope, so I am going to just change it. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is how I personally do it. And the first thing I do is I release the tension of the recoil spring. So I'll pull out some rope, hold the pulley, then I'll take the rope here and I'll allow it to go anti-clockwise, spring back like this until it stops. There, just a few turns. It stopped on its own. Now I've released the tension off the spring. In fact, you can see that now. Now I'm going to take off the handle. Basically, I'm just going to get some side cutters and just snip it. So now the handle's removed, I'm going to take a good mental picture of how this rope runs around here and secures. Or we can take a picture with a phone, just so that I know that when I remove this, I can put the new rope on the way it should be. So I'm going to remove the rope, and to do that, we'll need to remove this screw here. You can see we need a flat screwdriver. There we go. We can peel this up. That's it. Pulling off nicely without removing the pulley. Okay, there we go. We've come to that point there, and it looks like we just need to pry on it a bit. That's it. And pull it like that. So that's the orientation. It goes back. It just comes round in a loop and back on itself. Let's pull that out. And there's the old rope. Right, so I have a lot of new rope here. And we know, don't we, that we're going to need around about this much, because this is what came off. So we can align the two ropes up and measure how much we need, which is of course simply done. And then we can clip it off around there. Or if you've just got a recoil with no rope on it and you haven't got the old rope to reference, then I'll just show you how I get the length right. Before I start though, I'll just pull the old rope and knot out of the handle because I shall be needing to use it pretty swift once I get into a certain position with things. Okay, let's pull that out. There we go. Okay, that's now ready to use. So the first thing I deal with is the frayed end on the new rope. Obviously with nothing flammable around, just light the end, like so, and then get a cloth and then do that, pull up on it like that. Now it's tidied up the end, all them fray parts, and it's easier now to thread through the holes in the pulley. Then I'll take the whole recoil and align the hole on the pulley with the hole on the recoil. So they're aligned and I'm holding it there. Then I'll take the rope and thread it through the hole on the recoil so it comes through like this, and then continue threading it through the hole on the pulley. As you can see, it's coming out there like that. Then I'll secure the rope in the orientation we took the picture of. Getting the image back up so we can take this, so it goes around like that, then it goes under, like that, and then it goes around. Okay. There, something like that. In fact, if we take a look, that's exactly how it is on there. Now we can fit the retaining screw. Okay, that's tightened. So now we can pull at that now and tension all of this up. We'll pull here. Okay, that's putting nice tension on there, and we can make sure that all of this is in its place. Pull again. Yep, that's tensioned up. Lovely. I'm pulling on that. That's great. That's all in place. Yes, there's no tension on this yet. That's no problem. Okay, so now we've still got this arrangement. But what we'll do now is take this part of the rope and pull it up like this. And if you look here, there's a special recess we can put this in. It won't really matter if it's in one of these recesses, but let's use the right one there. We'll put it in there like that. Then we'll turn this pulley against the spring. In this case, it's clockwise. So we'll do that 3 times. We've done it 1, 2, 3. Hold it, and we'll pull the string out here. Out again, that's it. And then we'll let it go in as far as it wants to go in, but we'll hold it and control it as well. So let it go in. And we can see there, by looking at the pulley, there isn't quite enough rope on yet. So let's do that again. We'll pull this up again then. We'll find the special area, which is there. We'll place it in, and we'll turn it again another couple of times. Okay, 1, 2. Pull this out again. Let it go back. See how much rope we've got. If you look there, we're starting to fill the pulley. Perhaps we could get away with one more turn. Let's try it. We can turn it from this little recess here. Let's see where we stand with that. If we take a look there now, I think we've got enough rope on. What we want to do is make sure it's springy up to this point. So look here, yeah, I can feel the springiness here. If I went right back here, there wouldn't be. So I need to come forward a little, and I can feel the springiness there. Come forward a little bit more, I can feel more springy. It's putting more tension on the spring. So to round about this point then, I'm going to clip off the rope. I'm going to make sure it doesn't fall back in there, so I'm going to hold it like this. And I'm going to deal with the frayed ends here, the same as I did before. Give it a light, and then take that, and we've dealt with them frayed ends. Again, making sure there's nothing flammable around. Now, that will make it easier to thread that straight through the handle. So all I've got to do now is tie this end. Let it fall in. Right, that's okay. I've got a new rope on there, and it's all tensioned up. If I did need to put more tension on, I'd pull out the rope quite considerably, hold the pulley, pull out the rope from there like we did before, and go against the spring one more time. Like that, and that would just give a little more tension. That's that sorted. So we'll fit that to the machine, but before we do, we've got to make sure we fit the plastic shroud around the flywheel. And if we're wondering which orientation to put this, we can see that between the flywheel and the body, it's narrow there. It's just the same with this then. We just match that up. And then the recoil fits over that and secures it in place. There we go. The securing bolts, well, we've got 4 of these left. They're matching. Right, that's that on. That's okay. Okay, so we've nearly rebuilt this. What we'll do now is focus on the clutch side. First, let's fit the dog spike, or the bumper spike as some call it. So that goes there. I know I've got the right bolts here because these are the only ones left of this type. Next, let's fit the chain. I've took a good close look at the chain and it's not too bad. It's quite sharp, there's no damage on it, but if it doesn't cut very well, I will sharpen it. I always put the chain on first, just like so. Then the bar, we've already checked the bar, it's nice and straight, and there's very little burring, if any, on the edges there, suggesting wear. Looks pretty clean as well. Just lift up the chain, slide the bar in, then we'll align the chain into the bar. Then I'll take the cover and the chain brake handle and put them back together so they slot in, and you can see only one way, easy enough. Then we'll place these on together. Pins are aligned with the holes, and the protruding adjuster mechanism is in line with the hole on the bar. So while slotting them into place, we'll have to make sure that the other side of the handle is located into its place properly. That pulls out and locates onto its pivot point. There. Now I can place the nuts on, and I'll keep these on loose just for a moment. So they're on there securing it together, but they're still loose. That's because I need to tension the chain. But before I do that, I will just place in there the bolt. It's a special bolt that holds on the handle. It's here. It's got a special sleeve on it. Okay, so I'll place that in and we'll screw that right up. Okay, so that's all secure now. Okay, so I've tightened the spark plug. I'll place on the cap. I'm going to put on the top cover. The bolts are already retained in the top cover, by the way, here. That's all secure. Now, to tension the chain. What we need to do when we tension the chain is that while we are actually screwing in the adjuster to take up the slack, we need to make sure that the bar is pulled up like this. It's pulled up. There isn't much upward movement, but that's what we need to do, pull it up. Now it can be quite a fiddle to hold this up as well as adjust it. So an easier way to do this is to simply get the saw and pull up at the back. Now I've got that same upward pressure on the bar. So with that upward pressure there, it's easy to make the adjustment and you can see the chain taking up the tension nicely. And we need the type of tension on the chain where you can just pull it and it snaps back. This is still a little loose. Give it a little more tension. So we can still pull it up like this, but it snaps back. Just a little more again, a little more tension. And I would say that's okay, at least initially, and then we can revisit this after we've ran it. Then, still keeping that upward tension, we can tighten the nuts. Okay, that's just the way I do it. So there it is, all built up, and I'm going to run up this saw and set up the carburetor and cut some wood in a subsequent video. As I've said, this video was all about showing you how I would build up a saw. Hopefully you've learnt a few things by watching me build this machine, and I hope you've gained something from it. If you have, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll be back soon. Thank you for watching.